Hi everyone, my name is Gabby Gonzalez, and today I'm going to be talking about classical conditioning from chapter 12. The classical conditioning theory is defined as behaviors that are learned when you pair a neutral stimulus with a positive one. And this theory was first discovered by Ivan Pavlov during his research on the digestive system. So while he was studying secretions or gastric juices from the digestive system, he noticed that the gastric juices were secreted when objects associated with the meat powder being presented to the dogs were around. And during the study, they did intend for the gastric juices to flow when the meat powder was presented, but this made him realize that the dogs were starting to salivate even before it was presented. He began investigating conditioned reactions in 1899, but he did not provide any support for it, and so the theory didn't acquire much popularity until he reintroduced it in 1904. And this was the year he was awarded the Nobel Prize for his research on digestion. And so then at 50 years old, he decided to continue his research on conditioned reflexes for the next 30 years. Classical conditioning is also known as Pavlovian or respondent conditioning, and it is understood as learning through association. So it occurs when two stimuli are linked together to produce a new learned response in a person or an animal. So if you pair a neutral stimulus with an unconditioned stimulus, that already triggers an unconditioned response, which would be an innate behavior. So for an example, when a dog salivates, that's something that is not learned. Then the neutral stimulus will become a conditioned stimulus, and then the neutral stimulus will trigger a conditioned response, similar to the original unconditioned response. One of the most well-known examples of classical conditioning is Pavlov's experiment with dogs who would salivate in response to a bell sound. And so he would first present the bell sound to the dogs, and they did not salivate. So this would be the neutral stimulus. Then he presented the food, and they would salivate. So the food being the unconditioned stimulus, and the salivation would be the unconditioned response. He then repeatedly presented the dogs with the sound of the bell first, and then the food. And after a few repetitions, the dogs salivated when they heard the sound of the bell. And so then the bell became the conditioned stimulus, and the salivation had then become the conditioned response. There are 3 stages of classical conditioning, which include stage 1, before the conditioning, stage 2, during the conditioning, and stage 3, after conditioning. So stage 1 in the before conditioning, during this stage, the unconditioned stimulus produces an unconditioned response in a person or an animal. And then stage 2, during conditioning, a stimulus which produces no response is associated with the conditioned stimulus and then becomes known as the conditioned stimulus. Stage 3, which is after conditioning, now the conditioned stimulus has been paired with the unconditioned stimulus to create a new conditioned response. Pavlov's discovery of classical conditioning has done a lot for psychology, and it is often thought of as one of the most important discoveries in the history of psychology because it forms the basis of behavioral psychology. And it has proven that we can learn in both conscious and unconscious ways. It is also really important because it can be used for a variety of different purposes. For example, it can be used to treat people with mental health disorders, such as anxiety, depression, phobias, and it has even been proven to help treat substance abuse disorder. And so that wraps up classical conditioning. Thank you for listening.